Imagine a world where every tree had an attitude, every rock had a mood, and every patch of grass was silently judging you. No gods, no temples, just vibes. Welcome to pre-Roman Italy, a place so spiritually crowded, even your kitchen fire had a personality. This is where Roman mythology began, not with thunderbolts, but with whispers in the wheat, long before Jupiter threw his first lightning bolt, before Rome had marble columns, or emperors with questionable fashion choices. The earliest Romans were just trying to survive and stay on the good side of whatever invisible forces were lurking in their fields. These ancient Italian tribes didn't worship gods with names. They worshipped noumena, mysterious spirits that lived in everything. The river had a spirit. The door had a spirit. Your sourdough starter? Probably possessed. Life was a constant negotiation with unseen powers. You didn't pray. You politely asked. You didn't sacrifice. You offered snacks. It was like living with 1,000 invisible roommates, each with their own preferences and passive-aggressive energy. There was no mythology yet. No dramatic tales of divine betrayal or heroic quests. Just a quiet reverence for the everyday, the sacredness of planting seeds, lighting fires, and not angering the spirit of the broom. But as Rome grew, so did its imagination. These nameless forces began to take shape. They got names, personalities, and eventually, drama. The spirits of the hearth became Vesta. The spirit of war became Mars. And the spirit of, I'm watching you from the clouds, became Jupiter. This was the beginning, the soft, sleepy prologue to a mythology that would one day include gods, monsters, and enough divine soap opera to fill 1,000 scrolls. So next time you light a candle or open a door, remember, you're reenacting the earliest rituals of Roman belief, and somewhere, a very old spirit is nodding in approval. If you enjoyed this cozy dive into ancient Roman vibes, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Before Jupiter had a throne and Mars had a sword, Rome had feelings. Not the emotional kind, but the spiritual kind. The kind that made you say, I think the broom is mad at me. Welcome to the age of noumena, when every object had a spirit, and every spirit had an opinion. It was divine chaos, but make it cozy. Long before the Roman gods had names, personalities, and dramatic family feuds, the earliest Romans believed in something much simpler and much weirder. They believed in noumena, invisible forces that lived in everything, not just the big stuff like rivers and mountains, but the small stuff too. Spoons, door hinges, and that one patch of grass that never grew right. These spirits didn't have temples or statues. They didn't demand sacrifices or throw tantrums. They just existed, quietly, watching, judging. You didn't worship them so much as you tried not to offend them. It was like living in a divine version of a very picky roommate situation. Want to light a fire? Better ask the spirit of the flame for permission. Planting wheat, don't forget to nod respectfully to the spirit of the soil. Even sneezing had spiritual implications. You might be disturbing the air spirit's nap. This belief system was deeply personal. Every family had its own rituals, its own spirits, and its own version of, please don't curse our soup. There were no grand myths yet, just a quiet reverence for the everyday magic of life. But as Rome grew, so did its need for structure. The spirits began to take shape. They got names, jobs, and divine business cards. The spirit of the hearth became Vesta. The spirit of war became Mars. The spirit of don't trip on the threshold became Janus. And thus, the Roman pantheon began to form, not from thunderbolts or epic battles, but from the humble belief that everything mattered, and everything had a spirit worth respecting. Once upon a toga-clad time, Rome was minding its own business, worshipping tree spirits, and politely asking the fire not to burn the stew. Then it met Greece, dramatic, poetic, and absolutely overflowing with gods who had names, scandals, and abs. Rome didn't just borrow Greek mythology, it binge-watched it, took notes, and launched a full-scale divine rebrand. Rome was practical. If something worked, they used it. If something sparkled, they stole it. And Greek mythology? It sparkled like Apollo's forehead in a sunbeam. The Greeks had gods for everything: love, war, wine, awkward family dinners. They had myths with plot twists, heroes with tragic flaws, and gods who couldn't stop dating mortals. Rome saw this and thought, we could use some of that, but with more Latin. So they imported the entire Greek pantheon. Zeus became Jupiter, Hera became Juno, Poseidon became Neptune, Hades became Pluto. It was like a divine casting call where everyone got a new name and a Roman passport. But Rome didn't just copy, it customized. Greek gods were dramatic artists. Roman gods were civil servants. Jupiter wasn't just the king of gods. He was the guardian of law and contracts. Mars wasn't just a war god. He was the embodiment of Roman virtue and military excellence. Venus wasn't just beautiful. She was the mother of Rome's founding hero, Aeneas. The myths were reshaped to fit Roman values. Less poetry, more patriotism, less tragic romance, more civic duty. Even the temples were different. Greek temples were open-air theaters of worship. Roman temples were fortified headquarters of divine administration. This cultural remix created a mythology that was both familiar and uniquely Roman. It had the drama of Greece, the discipline of Rome, and the occasional divine scandal just to keep things interesting. Every king needs a queen, and every thunder-hurling sky, Dad needs someone to keep him humble. Enter Juno, goddess of marriage, women, and the eternal art of I told you so. She wasn't just Jupiter's wife. She was Rome's divine matron, and she had zero tolerance for nonsense. Mortal or immortal, Juno didn't ask for drama. Drama found her. As the Roman version of Hera, she inherited a husband with wandering eyes, a family full of overachievers, and a job description that included protect all women and manage divine chaos. She ruled with elegance, pride, and a glare that could silence a thunderstorm. Her temples were grand, her festivals sacred, and her patience limited. Mortals prayed to her for happy marriages, safe childbirth, and the strength to deal with husbands who thought they were Jupiter. Juno's symbol was the peacock, majestic, watchful, and slightly judgmental. Her sacred month was June, which is why so many weddings happen then. Coincidence? Not likely. Juno was the original wedding planner, minus the spreadsheets, and plus the divine wrath. Her relationship with Jupiter was complicated. He loved her, feared her, and occasionally forgot anniversaries. She responded with grace, fury, and the occasional mythological revenge plot. When Jupiter strayed, Juno didn't cry. She strategized. Her divine side-eye became legendary, and even gods tiptoed around her mood swings. But Juno wasn't just a wife. She was a protector. She stood for Roman dignity, feminine strength, and the sacred bond of marriage. She watched over women with fierce devotion, and her presence was felt in every Roman home, every wedding vow, and every whispered prayer for strength. In the grand celestial drama, Juno was the queen who kept the empire grounded. One glare, one peacock feather, and one divine decree at a time. If Jupiter was the sky dad, Neptune was the sea uncle. Mysterious, brooding, and always damp. He ruled the oceans, invented horses, somehow, and had the emotional range of a thunderstorm over a shipwreck. Dive in, but bring a towel. Neptune's domain is wet, wild, and occasionally neighing. Neptune didn't ask for the sea. He got it in a divine real estate deal with his brothers. Jupiter took the sky, Pluto got the underworld, and Neptune was handed the ocean. Vast, unpredictable, and full of fish with attitude. As the Roman version of Poseidon, Neptune came with a trident, a beard, and a reputation for mood swings. One moment, he was calm, letting sailors glide across glassy waters. The next, he was stirring up storms, just because someone forgot to say, "Thank you," before boarding a boat. But Neptune wasn't just about water. He was also the god of horses. Why? No one's entirely sure. Maybe he liked their manes. Maybe he thought waves galloped. Maybe he just wanted a pet that didn't swim away. Either way, Romans honored him with horse races, sea rituals, and the occasional confused shrug. His temples were coastal, his festivals splashy, and his personality tidal. He didn't meddle in mortal affairs as much as Jupiter, but when he did, it usually involved floods, shipwrecks, or dramatic oceanic entrances. Neptune was respected, feared, and occasionally misunderstood. He wasn't evil, just intense. He embodied the Roman respect for nature's power, the unpredictability of travel, and the majesty of the deep. Sailors prayed to him. Fishermen toasted him. Horses probably just whinnied in confusion. In the divine family, Neptune was the quiet storm. Powerful, poetic, and always a little salty. Every mythology needs a boss. Someone with a booming voice, questionable parenting skills, and a flair for dramatic entrances. In Roman mythology, that boss was Jupiter, the sky dad with a thunderbolt and a calendar full of divine meetings. He didn't just rule the heavens, he ruled the vibe. And oh, what a vibe it was. Jupiter wasn't born a king. He earned it by overthrowing his dad, surviving sibling drama, and mastering the art of thunderbolt diplomacy. Before he was Jupiter, he was just another cosmic kid with a destiny and a very loud voice. As the Roman version of Zeus, Jupiter came with a full resume: ruler of the sky, guardian of law, dispenser of justice, and occasional romantic chaos machine. He lived on Mount Olympus, which Rome borrowed from Greece, like a neighbor borrowing sugar and never returning the container. His throne was majestic, his beard was glorious, and his mood swings were weather events. Jupiter's job wasn't easy. He had to keep the gods in line, manage mortal prayers, and occasionally stop Neptune from flooding things out of boredom. He was the divine CEO, and his board meetings were legendary, mostly because they ended in lightning storms and passive-aggressive declarations. His symbols were the eagle, the oak tree, and the thunderbolt. The eagle represented his vision, the oak tree his strength, the thunderbolt his HR policy. If you broke the rules, you got zapped. If you followed them, you got mildly ignored. Classic management. Despite his power, Jupiter had a soft spot for Rome. He was the protector of the state, the enforcer of contracts, and the divine stamp of approval on every Roman ambition. When Rome expanded, Jupiter was always watching, probably judging, definitely listening, and occasionally throwing a lightning bolt just to remind everyone who's boss. He wasn't perfect. He had affairs, made mistakes, and occasionally forgot birthdays. But he was Jupiter, the Sky Dad, the Lawkeeper, the Thunder King. And in the grand mythological soap opera, he was the one holding the remote. Every family has that one sibling who doesn't show up to parties, prefers caves to crowds, and somehow ends up richer than everyone else. In Roman mythology, that sibling was Pluto, god of the underworld, lord of hidden wealth, and the original introvert with a throne. He didn't need thunderbolts. He had silence, shadows, and a portfolio of precious metals. When Jupiter divided the universe with his brothers, he took the sky. Neptune got the sea. Pluto? He got everything beneath. The underworld, the minerals, the souls, and the occasional awkward ghost. Pluto wasn't flashy. He didn't crash weddings or start wars. He ruled quietly, efficiently, and with the kind of calm that made even Jupiter nervous. His domain was the land of the dead, but also the source of Rome's wealth: gold, silver, iron, and the occasional cursed artifact. Romans respected Pluto, but didn't exactly cozy up to him. He wasn't worshipped with cheerful festivals or romantic poetry. His temples were rare, his rituals solemn, and his vibe deeply underground. Literally, he was married to Proserpina, the Roman version of Persephone, whom he famously abducted, though Roman poets tried to spin it as the divine matchmaking with seasonal benefits. Their relationship defined the myth of the seasons. When Proserpina was above ground, flowers bloomed. When she returned to Pluto, the earth rested. Pluto's power wasn't in noise, it was in permanence. He represented the inevitable, the unseen, and the value of what lies beneath. He didn't need worshippers. He had gravity, and taxes, and the quiet respect of every Roman who knew that death wasn't, to the end, just another realm, ruled by a god who preferred whispers to thunder. In the divine family, Pluto was the calm beneath the storm, steady, silent, and always watching from below. If Roman mythology were a family reunion, Mars would be the cousin everyone admired. Strong, noble, slightly terrifying, and always ready to settle disputes with a well-aimed spear. He wasn't just the god of war, he was the god of Roman identity, and his legacy marched straight into the heart of the eternal city. Mars didn't do subtle. He arrived in full armor, with a glare that could silence a senate, and a reputation that made even Jupiter raise an eyebrow. As the Roman version of Ares, Mars inherited the Greek god's love of battle, but Rome gave him something more: honor. Unlike Ares, who was often portrayed as reckless and bloodthirsty, Mars was noble, disciplined, and deeply respected. He wasn't just about fighting, he was about fighting right. He embodied Roman virtues: courage, strength, loyalty, and the ability to look good in bronze. Mars was also a dad, a very important one. He fathered Romulus and Remus, the twin brothers who founded Rome. According to legend, Mars fell in love with a Vestal virgin, awkward, and their children were raised by a she-wolf. Adorable. Romulus eventually founded Rome, and Mars became the city's divine patriarch. The original Roman dad joke, minus the jokes. His festivals were loud, his temples grand, and his fan base eternal. Roman soldiers prayed to him before battle, offered sacrifices, and wore his symbols like divine endorsements. His sacred animals were the wolf and the woodpecker, fierce, loyal, and surprisingly good at pecking shields. Mars didn't meddle in gossip or chase nymphs. He marched, he led, he inspired. He was the heartbeat of Roman ambition, the guardian of its legions, and the reason every Roman boy dreamed of wielding a sword and shouting for Mars. In the divine family, Mars was the proud warrior, fierce, focused, and forever tied to the city that bore his name. If Roman mythology were a fashion show, Venus would be the one who arrived late, stole the spotlight, and made everyone question their skincare routine. She wasn't just the goddess of love and beauty. She was the divine influencer who birthed a hero, founded a legacy, and made blushing an art form. Venus didn't walk. She glided. She didn't speak. She enchanted. As the Roman version of Aphrodite, Venus inherited all the charm, allure, and romantic chaos of her Greek counterpart. But Rome gave her something more: purpose. She wasn't just a pretty face. She was the mother of Aeneas, the Trojan hero who fled a burning city, wandered through epic poetry, and eventually laid the mythological groundwork for Rome itself. That's right, Venus was the grandmother of the eternal city. Talk about divine ancestry. Her origin story was dramatic, of course. Born from sea foam, don't ask. She emerged fully formed, radiant, and immediately ready to cause romantic confusion. Gods fell for her. Mortals wrote poems. Even statues blushed. But Venus wasn't just about love. She was about power. She represented fertility, desire, and the irresistible force that moved empires. Her temples were lavish, her festivals passionate, and her worshippers devoted. She was the patron of lovers, artists, and anyone who ever wrote, "Do you like me?" Check yes or no. Her symbols included the dove, the rose, and the mirror, all elegant, all slightly dramatic. She was often depicted with Cupid, her mischievous son, who flew around shooting arrows and ruining perfectly good friendships. Venus didn't fight battles. She won them with charm. She didn't build cities. She inspired them. And in the Roman pantheon, she was the heart, beating with beauty, longing, and the kind of divine charisma that could launch 1,000 ships, or at least 1,000 awkward love poems, in a pantheon full of thunderbolts, sea tantrums, and romantic chaos. Minerva was the calm in the storm. She didn't shout. She didn't flirt. She didn't throw spears unless she'd already calculated the trajectory. She was the goddess of wisdom, and she could outthink you before you finished your sentence. Minerva didn't arrive with fanfare. She arrived fully formed, from Jupiter's forehead, no less, wearing armor and carrying a book. That's right. While other gods were born in clouds or oceans, Minerva emerged from a migraine, and she's been quietly brilliant ever since. As the Roman version of Athena, Minerva inherited all the Greek goddesses' intellect, strategy, and artistic flair. But Rome gave her a new role: guardian of learning, protector of artisans, and patron of quiet competence. She was the goddess of, "I already solved that problem while you were panicking." Minerva didn't meddle in love triangles or start wars for fun. She preferred libraries to battlefields, unless the battle required a flawless plan and a well-timed ambush. She was the strategist behind victory, the muse behind masterpieces, and the reason Roman students whispered prayers before exams. Her symbols included the owl for wisdom, the olive tree for peace, and the loom for craft. She inspired weavers, sculptors, philosophers, and anyone who ever said, "Let me think about that." Her temples were serene, her rituals thoughtful, and her vibe quietly intimidating. Minerva was also a virgin goddess, not because she disliked romance, but because she had better things to do, like inventing math or designing armor that doubled as a metaphor. She didn't need drama to be powerful. She had ideas, and in Rome, ideas were everything. In the divine family, Minerva was the silent force, brilliant, composed, and always 3 steps ahead. If Roman mythology were a talent show, Apollo would walk in with a lyre, a glowing aura, and a prophecy about who's going to win. He wasn't just the god of light. He was the divine multitasker who healed, sang, predicted the future, and still had time to look flawless doing it. Apollo was borrowed straight from Greece. No rebranding, no Latin name swap. Rome took one look at him and said, "Perfect, don't change a thing." And who could blame them? Apollo was the golden boy of Olympus, radiant, refined, and annoyingly good at everything. He ruled over the sun, music, poetry, healing, and prophecy. Basically, if it involved brilliance, literal or metaphorical, Apollo was in charge. He played the lyre like a dream, healed the sick with a touch, and delivered cryptic messages through oracles that made fortune cookies look straightforward. His most famous oracle was at Delphi, where priestesses spoke in riddles that Apollo supposedly inspired. Want to know your future? Apollo had it, wrapped in metaphor, dipped in mystery, and served with a side of interpret this yourself. Apollo was also a healer. He could cure plagues or cause them, depending on his mood. Romans prayed to him during epidemics, hoping his sunny disposition would outshine their symptoms. His temples were serene, his rituals musical, and his vibe, celestial jazz, with a hint of divine sass. Despite his talents, Apollo had a complicated love life. He fell for mortals, nymphs, and occasionally trees. Long story. His romances often ended in heartbreak, transformation, or poetic inspiration. He was the original tragic artist, beautiful, brilliant, and emotionally unavailable. In the Roman pantheon, Apollo was the light in the darkness, guiding, glowing, and occasionally confusing everyone with his riddles. In a pantheon full of romantic entanglements and thunderous egos, Diana was the goddess who packed a bow, rode with deer, and said, "I'll be in the forest if you need me," which you won't. She was the moonlit rebel of Roman mythology, and she made solitude look sacred. Diana didn't do crowds. She preferred forests, moonlight, and the company of animals who didn't gossip. As the Roman version of Artemis, she was the goddess of the hunt, the moon, and wild things, including her own fiercely independent spirit. She was Apollo's twin sister, but while he sang songs and delivered prophecies, Diana was out tracking deer and protecting women. She was the divine guardian of childbirth, chastity, and please don't flirt with me unless you want to be turned into a tree. Her symbols included the bow and arrow, the crescent moon, and the stag, graceful, swift, and always ready to bolt when drama approached. Her temples were serene, her rituals sacred, and her vibe, moonlight with a side of "don't mess with me." Diana was a virgin goddess, not because she disliked love, but because she loved freedom more. She roamed the wilderness with her band of nymphs, protected the vulnerable, and occasionally turned arrogant hunters into cautionary tales. Looking at you, Actaeon, Romans admired her strength, her purity, and her refusal to play by anyone's rules. She was the patron of women, especially those who walked their own path, whether through forests, moonlit fields, or metaphorical journeys of self-discovery. In the divine family, Diana was the quiet force, wild, wise, and wonderfully untamed. In a divine family full of thunderbolts, sea storms, and romantic chaos, Vesta was the goddess who said, "Let's just light a fire and keep things warm." She didn't chase mortals, start wars, or throw shade. She kept the flame burning, literally, and reminded Rome that sometimes the quietest god is the most essential. Vesta wasn't flashy. She didn't wear armor or ride chariots. She wore simplicity like a crown and ruled over the hearth, the sacred fire at the center of every Roman home and every Roman heart. As the Roman version of Hestia, Vesta embodied warmth, stability, and the comforting crackle of a fire that never goes out. Her flame burned in the temple of Vesta, tended by the Vestal virgins, priestesses sworn to chastity, duty, and the eternal art of not letting things burn down. The Vestal virgins were chosen young, served for 30 years, and were treated with immense respect. Their job? Keep the sacred flame alive. If it went out, it was considered a very bad omen. Like, the gods are side-eyeing us. Level bad. Vesta didn't get involved in divine drama. She didn't argue with Jupiter or roll her eyes at Venus. She stayed out of the spotlight and focused on what mattered: home, family, and the quiet rituals that held Rome together. Her temples were round, symbolizing unity and eternity. Her festivals were peaceful, her worship gentle, and her presence grounding. Romans believed that as long as Vesta's flame burned, the city would endure. She was the spiritual pilot light of the empire. In the divine family, Vesta was the calm center, glowing, steady, and quietly powerful. If Roman mythology were a delivery service, Mercury would be the guy who shows up early, knows your secrets, and leaves you wondering what just happened. He wasn't just the messenger. He was the god of trade, travel, dreams, and I swear I didn't steal that. Fasten your sandals. This chapter moves quickly. Mercury didn't walk. He flew, with winged sandals, a winged helmet, and a winged attitude. He zipped between gods and mortals, like a divine courier with a flair for mischief. As the Roman version of Hermes, Mercury inherited the Greek god's speed, charm, and suspiciously sticky fingers. He was the official messenger of the gods, which meant he knew everything. Who was fighting? Who was flirting? Who forgot to sacrifice a goat? Mercury delivered news, guided souls to the underworld, and occasionally dropped cryptic hints just to keep things interesting. But Mercury wasn't just a divine mailman. He was the god of commerce, communication, and cleverness. Merchants prayed to him for good deals. Thieves prayed to him for good escapes. Dreamers prayed to him for inspiration. He was the patron of anyone who moved fast and thought faster. His symbols included the caduceus, a staff with snakes, the purse, for trade, and the rooster, because mornings are for movement. His temples were lively, his festivals energetic, and his vibe, caffeinated chaos with a side of charm. Mercury was also a trickster, not malicious, just mischievous. He loved puzzles, pranks, and poetic loopholes. He could talk his way out of anything, charm his way into anywhere, and leave you wondering whether you'd just been blessed or bamboozled. In the divine family, Mercury was the witty whirlwind, fast, funny, and always one step ahead. In a pantheon full of glowing gods and glamorous goddesses, Vulcan was the one who preferred soot to spotlight. He didn't strut. He smelted. He didn't gossip. He hammered. And while others threw lightning, Vulcan built the tools that made the thunder possible. Welcome to the forge of the gods, where sparks fly and legends are cast in iron. Vulcan wasn't born beautiful. In fact, he was famously not. Some myths say he was so aesthetically unconventional that his own mother, Juno, yeeted him off Mount Olympus. He landed in the sea, raised by sea nymphs, and grew up with a hammer in one hand and a chip on his shoulder. But Vulcan didn't sulk. He built. He became the god of fire, metalworking, and volcanoes, the divine blacksmith who forged weapons for gods, armor for heroes, and the occasional mechanical surprise. His forge was under Mount Etna, and when it rumbled, Romans said, "Ah, Vulcan's working overtime again." He made Jupiter's thunderbolts, Mars's weapons, even crafted golden thrones and automaton servants. He was the tech genius of the gods, part engineer, part artist, all soot and brilliance. Despite his rough start, Vulcan married Venus, the goddess of love and beauty. It was a divine odd couple. She was radiant, he was rugged. She inspired poetry, he inspired anvils. Their relationship was complicated. Let's just say Vulcan invented more than one trap for catching unfaithful lovers. His symbols included the hammer, the anvil, and fire. Not the cozy hearth kind, but the roaring, molten, don't touch that kind. His festivals, called Vulcanalia, were held in August, when the summer heat reminded everyone that volcanoes don't come with off switches. In the divine family, Vulcan was the maker, scarred, skilled, and silently shaping the tools of destiny. Not every god throws lightning or rides dolphins. Some just guard your pantry, bless your front door, and make sure your soup doesn't boil over. Welcome to the world of Rome's lesser gods and household spirits. The divine crew behind the scenes, quietly keeping the empire cozy, while Jupiter ruled the sky and Mars led armies. Rome had a whole cast of mini-gods working overtime in the background. These weren't flashy deities with temples and scandals. They were the Lares, Penates, and Janus, the spiritual support team of everyday Roman life. Lares were the guardians of the home and family. Think of them as divine house spirits who made sure your roof didn't leak and your relatives didn't argue too much. Every Roman household had a shrine to its Lares, often near the kitchen, because nothing says divine protection like proximity to snacks. Penates were the pantry gods. Yes, Rome had gods for food storage. They watched over your grain, your oil, and your emergency stash of olives. Romans offered them bits of meals, hoping for full bellies and 0 spoiled lentils. Janus, though technically a major god, was the ultimate doorman of the divine world. He had 2 faces, one looking forward, one back, and ruled over beginnings, transitions, and doorways. Every Roman entrance was sacred to Janus, and every new venture began with a nod to his double vision wisdom. These spirits didn't demand grand sacrifices. A little wine, a little bread, a little "thanks for not letting the roof cave in" was enough. They were woven into daily life, present in rituals, meals, and the quiet moments when Romans paused to honor the forces that kept things running smoothly. In the divine family, the household spirits were the unsung heroes, humble, helpful, and always there when you needed a little extra luck with your laundry. In a world of one-track minds and single-faced gods, Janus was the exception, the deity who looked both ways before crossing the divine street. He didn't rule the sky or the sea. He ruled transitions. Every beginning, every ending, every should I or shouldn't I moment had Janus quietly nodding from the doorway. Janus was unique to Rome. No Greek equivalent, no mythological cousin. Just Rome's very own two-faced wonder. One face looking forward, one looking back. He was the god of doors, gates, time, and change. Basically, if something opened, closed, started, or ended, Janus was already there, sipping divine espresso and watching it unfold. Romans worshipped Janus at the start of everything: battles, journeys, speeches, even breakfast. His name was invoked before any other gods, because you couldn't begin anything without passing through his metaphorical doorway. His temples were built with two entrances symbolizing his dual nature, and in January, named after him, Romans honored Janus as they looked ahead to the new year while reflecting on the old. He was the original New Year's resolution coach, minus the guilt trips. Janus didn't meddle in love affairs or throw lightning bolts. He didn't need drama to be powerful. His strength was in perspective, seeing both sides, understanding transitions, and guiding Romans through the messy middle of change. He was also the god of choices. Standing at the crossroads, Janus whispered, "Pick wisely." And if you didn't, well, he'd already seen it coming. In the divine family, Janus was the quiet sentinel, watching, waiting, and always ready to open the next door. Every great city needs a great origin story. Rome's begins not with architects or politicians, but with twin babies, a she-wolf, and a family feud that ends in empire. It's messy, mythic, and just dramatic enough to make you say, "Yep, that tracks." Romulus and Remus weren't your average twins. For starters, they were sons of Mars, the god of war, and a Vestal virgin named Rhea Silvia. That's already a scandal. Add in a jealous king, a river rescue, and a wolf with maternal instincts, and you've got the makings of a legend. The story goes like this. The twins were abandoned at birth, placed in a basket, and floated down the Tiber River like divine driftwood. They were discovered by a she-wolf who nursed them with surprising tenderness and zero judgment. Later, a shepherd named Faustulus found them and raised them as his own. As they grew, Romulus and Remus became strong, brave, and slightly competitive. Eventually, they decided to build a city. But here, where things got spicy, they couldn't agree on where to build it. Remus liked one hill, Romulus liked another. They argued, they competed, and in a tragic twist, Romulus killed Remus. It wasn't exactly a team-building exercise, but Romulus went on to found the city, naming it Rome after himself. He became its first king, and the city grew from myth to might, carrying the legacy of Mars, wolves, and sibling drama forever. Romans loved this story. It gave them divine ancestry, heroic roots, and a reminder that greatness often comes from struggle, and occasionally from being raised by a wolf. In the divine family, Romulus was the mortal spark, fierce, flawed, and destined to build something eternal. Roman religion wasn't just about believing, it was about behaving. The gods didn't want your love. They wanted your respect, your rituals, and your best goat. Welcome to the Roman way of worship, where divine peace was a full-time job, and even birds had something to say about your future. Romans didn't worship with wild abandon. They worshipped with precision. Every prayer, every sacrifice, every temple visit was part of a cosmic contract, a sacred agreement called Pax Deorum, or peace with the gods. Break the terms, and you risked floods, plagues, or worse, bad harvests. Temples were everywhere, grand ones for Jupiter, cozy ones for Vesta, and even tiny shrines for household spirits. Each was a divine office, where mortals filed their spiritual paperwork through offerings, rituals, and the occasional dramatic procession. Sacrifices were common: animals, wine, grain, and sometimes symbolic gifts. The goal wasn't to bribe the gods, but to honor them. Think of it as divine tipping. Thanks for the sunshine. Here's a perfectly roasted ox. Then there were the augurs, priests who read omens by watching birds. Yes, birds. If they flew left, it was bad. If they flew right, it was good. If they pooped on your toga, well, interpretations varied. Augury was serious business, and no major decision, war, law, or lunch, happened without consulting the skies. Romans also practiced divination, libations, and vows. They built altars, burned incense, and whispered prayers in Latin that sounded like legal documents. Religion wasn't just spiritual, it was civic. Keeping the gods happy meant keeping Rome strong. In the divine family, worship was the glue, binding mortals and immortals in a ritual dance of respect, rhythm, and roasted offerings. Even the most powerful gods eventually step off the stage. As Rome changed, so did its stories, fading from temples into tales, from rituals into legends. This is the twilight of the Roman pantheon, where old gods made room for new faith, and myths became memories, whispered under starlight. For centuries, the Roman gods reigned, in marble temples, in whispered prayers, in the rhythm of daily life. But empires evolve, and so do beliefs. As Rome expanded, it absorbed new cultures, new ideas, and eventually, a new religion that would reshape the world: Christianity. It didn't happen overnight. For a while, Jupiter and Jesus coexisted awkwardly, like roommates with very different vibes. But over time, the old gods, with their thunderbolts, love triangles, and sacred geese, began to fade from public life. Temples were closed, statues were toppled or quietly repurposed. The Vestal Virgins extinguished their eternal flame, and the gods, once so present in every Roman breath, slipped into silence. But they didn't vanish. Not really. They lived on in poetry, in art, in the names of planets and months. They became metaphors, muses, and bedtime stories. Mars still marched in military minds. Venus still inspired love. Mercury still ran through our words and our messengers. And Rome, the city they helped shape, endured. Its stones still echo with their names. Its arches still cast shadows where gods once walked. And in every story told, every statue admired, every myth remembered, the gods smile, not as rulers, but as legends. And now, dear dreamer, the saga ends. The gods have returned to their stars. The temples are quiet, and the myths are tucked in for the night. May your dreams be filled with winged sandals, golden lyres, and moonlit forests. Sleep well, traveler of tales. Good night.